Colonel, this is Snake. I'm approaching the secret base now. Can you read? I'm a child. How's it going, guys? It's Hobby from Omni Props, and today we're getting a little more fashionable around here. Middle of July. In all seriousness, guys, today we are finally going to be starting the build for Variks' Tunic. Poncho? Tunic poncho. Whatever you may call it, it's happening. And it's actually made in 3 parts. There's the main tunic, which is simply fashioned with a belt that connects the 2 pieces together. And we have these scarves. Here's one that I actually finished. And the video, of course, I will show you step by step how I made this. But it's not like a traditional scarf. It actually goes around on the shoulder. And of course, there's going to be another one. But it trails along in the back, similar to like a cape. So, Hunter Master Race. And I'll be honest, it took a little bit to get back into the old sewing machine itself. Last time I busted that thing out was when I worked on my Cade 6 cosplay, which definitely had a lot of parts and pieces involving pleather and brown fabrics and etc, etc. But for Variks, at least for the base of it, it's just green fabric. Of course, later on, you can see on screen here that he has a lot of gold trim details. He has the House of Judgment insignia on his chest, and he has like this weird fishnet thing going on the bottom. We will get to that in part 2 of this video. But for now, we're just going to be working on the base because although it's really good to plan ahead, you don't want to overwork yourself. Of course, whenever I do any project, I always build a template. These templates were designed by yours truly, and they help me trace out exactly how the shape of the tunic or the scarves needs to be, because without it, we're prone to make mistakes. So like I said earlier, it is just 3 pieces, the tunic and the 2 scarves. Let's get into it. Alrighty, so the first thing we're gonna do before we start anything is to iron down the green fabric. That way, whenever I pin the fabric to the template or whenever I do my cutting, everything will be nice and straight and no room for error. Once I did that, I then grabbed my pins and I started pinning down the templates onto the fabric itself. An important note here is that this is actually just 1 piece of fabric that I folded into 2. That way, whenever I cut this fabric, it will give me 2 of the tunic pieces instead of just doing it 1. It just makes the process far quicker. I also then used my metal ruler to trace out the template using a white color pencil, so then it will be easier for me to see what I'm cutting. And I also made sure to trace the collar itself. And once I did that, it leaves me with a nice outline of the template. It's also important to note to add a seam allowance to all the edges and corners of the tunic. A very common mistake for many cosplayers such as myself is to forget to do this because you're so excited to start making the costume that when you attach it, the costume is a lot tighter than you would have liked it to. So it's important to make sure you add usually around inch or inch and a half to make sure you have enough space to attach the 2 pieces together. You remember those pins? Yeah, they're back, and make sure you're good friends with them. So you want to make sure you pin the inside of the seam allowances, making sure to grab both of the pieces of the fabric together. And once you add your pins to all the sides, it is then time for snippety. So you want to make sure you get your scissors and cut right on the seam allowance line, the outer one, mind you. And once you cut all the edges, it will eventually end up something like this. The 2 pieces are going to be put together to make the front of the tunic, and the other 2, of course, are going to be made for the back of the tunic. But before we attach them, we want to make sure the edges look nice and neat, so we're actually going to hem the sides of it with our sewing machine. But in order to do that, we gotta pin the sides. I'm telling you, those pins, they're just going to keep coming back to back. But once you pin your sides, it is time to bust out the old sewing machine. Now for sewing these pieces together, it's nothing too difficult. I went at a moderate speed, not too slow, not too fast, just right. Now the collar itself was just a tad difficult given the fact that it was more of a circular, angular-esque shape.
but nothing that we couldn't handle. Once all the pins were out and everything was sewn together, I then put it on for a test fit using a regular belt just to see how it looks. I was very pleased with how it turned out, and I put it on my mannequin just to see a good view of it. And now, it's not finished until we do the scarves. So here is the template for the scarves itself, and everything is going to be pretty much what I did before with the main tunic, involving pinning, tracing, and cutting, so nothing too complicated here either. Although it may seem like I don't like the pinning process, it's oddly satisfying in a way, mostly for the fact that once you pin everything and once you sew the sides together, and when you take the pins out one by one, it's actually pretty cool because you're starting to see the finished product right before your eyes. And once you cut 2 pieces out, you want to make sure you cut an additional 2 more to form 2 shorter scarves. And once you pin everything down and pin down the sewing allowances, you then just start hemming the sides with the sewing machine. Again, not too fast, not too slow. Wasn't too difficult at all, given the fact that it was just hemming the edges, no real circular edges to worry about. But once it's all nice and sewed together, I then ironed out the scarves, just like what I did with the tunic. I didn't do in the video, but I want to make sure that everything is nice and neat before I weather it out later on in part 2. But I slapped it onto the mannequin, and I am super happy with how it looks.
And here it is, guys, the base of the tunic. It's officially done. Big. Spooky. Again, this was pretty simple to do with only 1, 2, 3 pieces. Still took a little bit of time, considering I needed to bust out that sewing machine again, and it doesn't really cooperate with me most of the time, so... But when it works, it works. And I'll be honest, it actually was kind of generous to me this time around. But of course, this is the base of the tunic. As I mentioned from the beginning of the video, there's a lot more detail that needs to be done. So, I'm going to be creating a part 2, where I'm going to be showing you how exactly I will be doing the gold trim designs and the scarves, the House of Judgment symbol on his chest, and last but certainly not least, my personal favorite part is the overall distressing and the fishnet design at the bottom of the tunic, and just weathering all in general. One thing I neglected to add when I was creating the scarves was the Velcro patches that I'm planning to install later on. That's going to go right underneath the bottom of the scarf here and attach the shoulder. That way it doesn't freely move around, and it does tend to fall off your shoulder. It is connected with the belt up here, but in the back, just like a cape, the Velcro will keep it in place right on top of the shoulder. I'll do this for both sides, obviously. So, if you want to know exactly when the part 2 of the video is going to drop, and you want to see some more funny cosplay shenanigans with this guy, I definitely recommend you follow me on my social medias at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, all at Omni Props. And why don't you join me in my next adventure, where I continue to forge fantasy into reality. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Have an awesome day.